So y'all know the game Among Us, right? It's funny how that game suddenly caught fire a few years ago. I'm not saying that the game is a stolen idea or anything, but it really is a video game adaptation of a youth group game that's been around for decades called Mafia. Oh, I love church games. They always make me feel so safe and loved. How do you play Mafia? Okay, so in Mafia, there's a few of your friends who are secretly plotting to murder you and everyone else who lives in the town, and the townspeople's job is to accuse everybody and execute one another until eventually, hopefully, they manage to kill off the Mafia. Oh. And there's a doctor who has the ability to save one person per round, but the doctor usually just chooses to save themselves. That doesn't seem very... And there's a narrator too, and the narrator's job is to spontaneously come up with the most horrible, gruesome ways that the Mafia has killed somebody, and then everybody gets to sit there and listen to the horrible nightmare of a murder story, and you get to listen to one of those stories every round.
And this is a classic church youth group game?
That's right. The thing that makes Among Us so fun and so frustrating is that it's pretty difficult to know who to trust. You might be playing the game with a handful of your closest, most trusted friends, but for that 10 minutes, every single one of them is totally sketchy. In fact, I'm fairly sure it's happened to you before. You formed some sort of partnership with one of the other crewmates, and you walk around together, you're completing the tasks, and for the first few minutes, it seems like that friend you brought along is totally on board with the plan, you know? You all are like accomplishing tasks together, and you're like watching each other's backs. But then 2 minutes in, all of a sudden, you find yourself dead on the ground while your friend escapes through a vent hatch to go find some more people to sabotage. You know, the thing that makes the game so fun is the thing that makes the game so frustrating. No one likes when the person who's supposed to be on their team actually winds up sabotaging their goals and objectives. And for some of you, that's exactly how you feel about God sometimes, isn't it? It feels like you became a Christian, or you finally started taking your faith seriously in the hopes that God would help you complete the tasks that you want to complete and get to the places that you want to go. And while sometimes it feels like God is on your side for that plan, it too often feels like he's putting up obstacles or making things go wrong so you don't get to do the things that you hope and dream that you get to do. You were finally having the kind of basketball season that would put you on the map so scouts would notice you, but then
sabotage.
God lets you get a high ankle sprain and you're out for 6 weeks. Things were finally becoming peaceful between you and your sister, but then
sabotage.
God lets your sister go through a breakup and now she's mean to you all over again. You were so close to finally earning the respect of your bully, but then
sabotage.
God lets you slip and fall in front of everybody in the cafeteria, and now you're an easy target again. Like a round of Among Us, you've got these things that you want to do, and you've got these places that you want to go in life, and you've chosen God to be your wingman, and yet despite the fact that choosing God would seem like the right choice, I sometimes feel like God is more of an imposter than a crewmate. Something seems really off about that, but the way you currently see it, there's no other conclusion to draw. Maybe we need to see it differently. Thousands upon thousands of years ago, there was a little baby boy born as part of an oppressed people group. And while many of the baby boys of this race didn't make it back then, this particular kid was fortunate enough to grow up safe and sheltered from the hardships his people had to face. He was privileged, honestly. But despite the fact that he grew up with comforts and protections only afforded to Egyptian royalty, Moses never forgot who his people really were. And one day, when he was a young man, Moses' anger over the Egyptians' treatment of his people boiled over, and he killed one of the Egyptians that he saw abusing one of his people. So Moses then found himself a man on the run. He had spent most of his life protected and cherished, but now he was hunted and outcasted. And when the dust settled, Moses' new life consisted of being a shepherd in a remote, far-off place, living a quiet life, probably trying to forget his past. Now, pause here. Have you ever been where Moses is right now? Have you ever been at a place in life where all you want to do is forget what you've been through and just move on? Ever wanted to just erase your mistakes and pretend like they never happened? Have you ever sighed with relief at the thought that you'd never have to go back there again, or you'd never have to do that again, or you'd never have to see him again? I have to imagine that's where Moses was. And I have to imagine that's where Moses wanted to stay. Like, if Moses' life was a game of Among Us, Moses' primary objectives were to take care of his sheep, wrestle on the ground with the sun, and play footsies with his wife at the dinner table. And that's why it must have felt like complete and total sabotage when God walks into the next chapter of Moses' life. We're in Exodus 3, starting in verse 1. One day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. "This is amazing," Moses said to himself. "Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it." When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, "Moses, Moses." "Here I am," Moses replied. "Do not come any closer," the Lord warned. "Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, "I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt." Now, we established this a few minutes ago. What's the last thing Moses wanted to do? Go back to Egypt. And what's the first thing God tells Moses to do? Go back to Egypt.
Sabotage.
So what happens next really shouldn't surprise any of us. Verse 11. But Moses protested to God, "Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt?" God answered, "I will be with you, and this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain." But Moses protested, "If I go to the people of Israel and I tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what should I tell them?" God replied to Moses, "I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent me to you.'" And this isn't the end of the back and forth between God and Moses, not by a long shot. Moses continues to come up with reasons why he shouldn't go back and get involved in this ugly, messy thing that he had long been running from. This was not the plan. This was not the objective. This was not what Moses wanted to do with his life. So for God to come into the picture only to steer Moses in a totally different direction than Moses wanted to go in?
Sabotage.
But if you're familiar with Moses' story, then you know that this moment right here at the burning bush was the beginning of the rest of Moses' life. Like, whether you're a churchy person or not, the reason that you know the name Moses is because of right here in this moment where God steered Moses away from the quiet life he wanted to live and drove Moses right into the thick of the mess and the chaos and the oppression that the Israelites were going through in the land of Egypt. Everything started here. And by the end of his life, Moses wouldn't have had it any other way. He gave up control and surrendered his plans to God, and literally the rest is history. And really, that's the dynamic between us and God when we place our faith in Jesus. Becoming a Christian is about surrender. It's saying, God, I've tried being in the driver's seat and I failed. I confess my sin to you and surrender my life over to you. So For those of us who have placed our faith in Jesus, it should be no surprise to us when God starts steering our lives in directions we wouldn't have chosen. Like, why are you so confused about who's driving here? You already tried being in the driver's seat of your own life. It didn't go well. That's why you handed the keys over to Jesus in the first place. So why are you now sitting in the back seat complaining to God that he's going the wrong way? You think you're in the driver's seat and God's there to help you get where you want to go, but you're wrong. God isn't sabotaging you. You're just confused about who's driving. Here's the point. God is taking you to his destination, not the other way around. I know you have things you want to do and achieve and become. I get that. But when you see through the lens of the gospel, you will recognize that you have already given the keys to Jesus and told him to take you where he wants to go. That's what being a Christian is. So it's silly to now accuse him of sabotage because he's not taking your life where you wanted your life to go. But here's what I can tell you. And I can tell you this because of my own story, as well as the story of people like Moses. Even when things aren't going your way, you can trust that handing the keys of your life over to Jesus was and still is the right decision. God may not be taking you where you want to go, but where he is taking you is ultimately better. We'll talk more about that next week.